Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Next Frontier in Insights. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and today I'm really happy to have Dr. Ewelina Kurtys here with me, all the way from the UK. Um, we were chatting a few weeks ago, and I was so impressed with what she's working on. And I was like, everybody needs to hear what she has to say. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's start first by kind of like getting to know who you are. I always start the show like that. I'm always interested in knowing people's backgrounds and their storyline as to what
Mhm.
got them to where they are today. So just give us a little bit about a little bit of background about yourself first.
So I'm Ewelina Kurtys. I'm a strategic advisor at Final Spark. I have PhD in neuroscience, so I've been always doing experimental research in biology, mainly in brain biology.
Uh-huh.
And later I left academia for entrepreneurship, and I started to work with startups, and I discovered the great potential which artificial intelligence brings. So
Mhm.
I totally re-educated myself in this area, and I started to work on commercial applications of AI.
Mhm.
And later I started to work also on the future of AI. What we believe is biocomputing.
Hmm.
And biocomputing is kind of combination of neuroscience and artificial intelligence. So this is a project which is run by Final Spark in Switzerland.
Mhm.
And the objective is to build computer using living neurons, the same as we have in our brains. And the idea is that such a computer will use 1 million times less energy
Hmm.
than traditional digital computers. So this is to solve the problem of increasing energy consumption by AI, because we know that AI is using exponentially increasing amount of energy. And today we can still cope with this, we can still manage, but it is expected that in the few years it
Mhm.
can become a problem. So there are two possible solutions. Either we find alternative energy sources, or we find alternative computing, and we work on the second option.
You have already said some words that are going to blow people's minds already.
Mhm.
So let's kind of like circle back a little bit because I think we'll need to
Mhm.
kind of like level set everybody first on what do you mean by some of the terminology that you use, right? So let's start first with biocomputing. What is it and how is it different from traditional computing? Just help us understand that part first.
Yes, so biocomputing is a new field. So actually, the nomenclature is not yet established. So sometimes when you read about biocomputing on the internet, you might find different things.
Okay.
But what we do is actually also called wetware computing or organoid intelligence, or also maybe synthetic biology sometimes. And here we try to program living neurons. So we have in the lab, in vitro on the dish, living human neurons, which we obtain from human skin. So these neurons are more or less the same as what we have in our brains.
Okay.
And we know that they are very good at processing information and very efficient, because our brain can run on one banana for all day. And for the same tasks, if we want to use digital, we would need small nuclear plant. So
Hmm.
brain is very efficient because neurons are very efficient to process information. So we put the neurons in vitro on the electrodes. You can see this in our website, finalspark.com. On the section live, you can see the live view from our lab, how it looks exactly.
Okay.
So we use such a round structures of living neurons, which is called neurosphere, and they have around half millimeter diameter.
Hmm.
They have around 10,000 neurons each, and we put them on electrodes, usually on the 8 electrodes, and because of that, we can send them electrical signals and we can measure response because neurons are communicating through the electrical signals. And we would like to be able to program them
Hmm.
so that we can have a bioprocessor, which will be extremely energy efficient.
So when you talk about, okay, so 10,000 neurons, really small. There's so many things that I'm curious about. So first and foremost, let's start with like what is the computational capabilities of even say 10,000 neurons? Like, do you have some yardstick or some way to give people context as to what it can do with even say 10,000 neurons, for example?
So for the moment, it's very early stage. We do R&D,
Yeah.
fundamental research. So we were able to store 1 bit of information, so it's very little, but we are sure that 10,000 neurons can do much more. We are just working on this because it's very difficult actually to figure out how to program neurons, and the reason for this is because nobody really knows how neurons are encoding information. So we know that they produce spikes. We know quite a lot how they process spikes, electrical spikes, but we don't know really how to program them, how to send them signals and get some meaningful answer. And also neurons are dynamic system, so that means they change over time. And this is also a huge difficulty of this project. So we do a lot of trial error, a lot of experiments.
Yeah.
And so far we just store 1 bit of information.
Okay. And do you count the number of neurons in that situation, or are you just going to like focus on the bit of information and how much you can actually process or capture?
No, it's rather based on the collective activity of neurons.
Collective activity.
So we have 8 electrodes. We measure activity from each.
Okay.
And actually, we can mathematically calculate something what is called a center of activity. So it depends on how much electricity we measure from each electrode.
Okay.
And this center of activity can be displaced. So then this means 1 bit. So you have yes or no kind of information.
It's very binary, in other words. Basically,
Yes,
I get.
although it's really not the way how we are going to program them, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are not going to make such a yes-no logic gates.
Yeah.
It's rather for demonstration that something is working, that in some way we can control the behavior of neurons in vitro.
So given where you are, because you're going into the heart of, computing, capabilities, in terms of, how information gets stored, how it gets transferred, how much energy gets used. I remember you're really making me think back to my days in electrical engineering,
Yes.
when I was learning all this, in my undergraduate classes. It's not that easy to kind of like, orient even silicon to do that efficiently. I remember like, back in the 80s, we were learning how to do that. Of course, things have become far more efficient since then. But here you're talking about neurons. So, you mentioned two challenges already, right? One is, what does it take? And then, it's also dynamic as well. How do you solve for them? Or is there a game plan that you already have? Or how are you kind of like figuring all of that stuff out? I'm just curious.
So this is very challenging because there is no formal framework on how you should program neurons. So
Yeah.
this is still area of active research.
Mm.
And actually we do a lot of trial and error. This is very engineering approach.
Yeah.
So we don't try to really understand how neurons work, but we just want to make them work if possible,
Yeah.
even without understanding. So this is why our lab is fully automated. So we run a lot of experiments automatically. So that means that you write code in Python, in programming language,
Yeah.
and then it's automatically executed for many hours so that we can collect many data. We can try different scenarios on how we could program neurons. So yes, it's very long and very repetitive work, and
Yeah.
we need a lot of iteration with neurons. But the difficulty is we don't have good assumptions theoretical, so that's why we have to do experimental, kind of trying different stuff a little bit, trial and error. So that's why it's so difficult.
I get that. So as you're going through this experimentation process, are you also finding that there are certain areas that show more promise than others? Are you able to share any of that stuff right now?
Which areas? What do you mean?
So, for example, as you're trying to figure out, storage or processing a particular kind of like, instructional steps or whatever it might be, where are you finding the most promise right now?
So this is a good question. So actually, when we look at the human brain, is an example where neurons are already working very well.
Yeah.
And we can see what brain does good, what computer does better. So we know actually memory is maybe not a strong point of neurons, but they are very good, very efficient in processing complex information. So computer is better for repetitive tasks, high speed, a lot of memory, but human brain is good at complex tasks, which where it's burning very little energy. So our bet for the moment is generative AI. So we think, and generally everything what you can run on digital neurons, you could
Yeah.
theoretically run on the living neurons.
Yeah.
But we think it's also there are stuff which don't have to be very quick.
Mhm.
but are complex. So we think generative AI for now, but it's very long term. We expect the computer to be ready in 10 years.
10 years.
We are currently talking to investors. We are seeking 50 million Swiss francs, which is around $50 million.
Hmm.
And with this investment, we can kind of rely on this timeline of 10 years. We have specific objective milestones, but without the investor, it might take longer.
Of
And for
course.
now, we are self-funded. We are a very small team, only
Yeah.
6 people. So of
Hmm.
course, it's getting much slower.
I totally understand. So, I'm still so like fascinated by the fact that you're taking living neurons and you're basically trying to incorporate
Mhm.
like the thought the learnings of neuroscience and then the learnings of AI together, and be able to find that intersection right there.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, like how does this impact in terms of like do you have a vision in terms of, okay, there's of how will it even look? Is it going to be like a device? Is it going to be something that gets attached to your
Mhm.
body? What are your thoughts on that?
So we want to build a general purpose computer, and
Yeah.
our bet is on a centralized computer because we think neurons are very fragile and they still need care from very highly skilled professionals. So we think that the best way would be to build a central bioserver, which will be available remotely,
Yeah.
the same way like today you can access cloud computing. And yes, that's how we imagine this. And we would like to build a huge structure of neurons, much bigger than human brain, maybe even 100 meters long. Because of course, in this project, we kind of could go unlimited. So it's only engineering challenge on
Yeah.
how big could be the computer.
Right. Right. So you're, in essence, what you're saying is that you can build it as big as you want it to be, right?
Yes.
And by having a centralized system, you're able to then generate, and create capabilities that would be harder to have on, say, like a mobile device or something like that. Is what I'm imagining, right? Am I thinking about this the right way?
No, for the moment, we want to actually match the performance of computers, silicon, but
Yeah.
just make everything more energy efficient. So, actually, for now, we think it would be great if for the end user there is no difference. You just run software,
Yeah.
the same algorithm on living neurons, but it's just cheaper. So, for example, you could use ChatGPT, maybe or some other LLM. It would just be cheaper.
So, I get the vision part of it, right? And I
Mhm.
get that you're currently still in the process of developing it. I get that part.
Mhm.
But help us understand what can we expect. Let's say, for example, you got the funding and things like that, right? So, where would you be a year from now or 2 years from now in terms of the development and um, you know uh, capabilities that come in this space, basically?
So our milestone for the next 2 3 years after the investment would be learning in vitro. So that means we would like to be able to perform some simple algorithm on neurons. We want that they're able to learn. So in the brain, it happens that neurons are rewiring, so they change connections, and
Hmm.
this is how the process of learning. And we would like to execute this process efficiently also in vitro on the dish, and that will be some simple things, maybe some classification like you use in machine learning.
Yeah.
And later, the next milestone, another 3 years, would be advanced algorithm to match the performance of digital computers. And the third, the last milestone, big one, is scaling. So we would like to build this huge structure because now we have this little blob of cells,
Hmm.
a half millimeter diameter, but for research is enough. But we would like to have in the future a huge structure of neurons. So it's a big engineering challenge, but no, of course, not impossible. So
Hmm.
we would like to work on this. So then in around 10 years, we would have bioservers, which would be extremely competitive compared to digital hardware. So we believe it will be very profitable. So we actually predicted billions of profit if once the technology is working.
Hmm. Okay, so um, with the milestones that you talked about,
Yes.
those are pretty significant leaps from one milestone to the next, I would imagine, right? Because to
Mhm.
go from one simple algorithm to complex algorithms, and when you think about large language models, those are highly complex with like billions of parameters now.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just curious as to how, what would you're not just inventing right now, you're also figuring out how to build the foundational capabilities to be able to manage that degree of complexity also is what I'm thinking too, right?
Mhm.
So could you expand a little bit on that so I can understand a little bit better?
But you mean to how to culture neurons, how to
Ye-
keep them alive for a long time? Yes,
yeah.
so we absolutely work on this,
Yeah.
and actually this is very important part of our R&D. So far we can keep neurons for 3 months alive, but we know from nature that they can live for much longer. But just keeping them alive on the electrodes is very challenging. So we have to work on this. We have already some patents actually how to keep neurons alive for a long time, but we want to extend this time. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff also how to prepare neurons. There are many protocols known in the literature, and there is a lot of also debate in the scientific community on which are the perfect neurons, let's say for learning,
Mhm.
and which protocols are best. So yes, we experiment a lot in our lab to try find the best ways of working, the most effective.
Right. So as so I'm just thinking through then, like if there's a longevity issue that you're also solving for,
Mhm.
right, and you think that you have a pathway forward on that,
Mhm.
where do you actually extract the neurons from? Is it going to be from humans, or is it going to be like how do they self-generate, or how do you actually add neurons to the mix?
So the neurons are human, and actually you can buy commercially stem cells, which
Okay.
are derived from human skin. So today you can reprogram the cells of human skin. You can create stem cells, and today you can buy them actually on the market.
Okay.
For research, people are buying them. And then once you have such a stem cells, you can differentiate them. That's called differentiation. So basically, you can reprogram them so that the genes which are characteristic for neurons are activated, and then these cells will become neurons, because every cell in your body has the same DNA, but it's just gene expression which is deciding which cells it will become. So we can differentiate them and make them neurons. So in this way we have human neurons in very high quantity, so it's very easy actually to scale, at least to produce a lot of material. So that's a great advantage.
But then people have different DNA and everything, right? So depending on where what is the source in this case, wouldn't that also impact the kind of quality that you would get, or is that
Yes,
something
you
you
could
never worked
expect,
out?
of course, because we differ in IQ a lot, and there are many,
Yeah.
different people. And of course, this is due to changes in our genetic and also the brain and the neurons. But at this stage, it really doesn't matter. We could also use mice or rats neurons. So we believe it doesn't really matter. We just do basic stuff.
Yeah.
But we could expect that in the future, when we have advanced computing, that the genetics might be important.
Okay.
Of course.
So that's one part. The genetics could potentially be important. But what about the part about do all neurons behave the same way, or are there certain kinds of neurons that do certain kinds of tasks and other neurons do other kinds of tasks? Is there any kind of like differentiation there also, or no? I'm not a biologist, so I don't really know. So that's why I'm asking the question.
Yes, there are many type of neurons actually, and we try to play with different combinations and what is best for learning. So you are right. That's also is one of the research question: which
Yep.
neurons, which proportion we should produce so that we have optimum learning.
Wow. So, in essence, what you're really talking about, in a way, is you're taking basically the human body, you're trying to replicate that through the neuron structures to be able to give you, like a significantly higher computing power, along with a reduction in energy usage.
Mhm,
This is kind of like next level stuff here, right? So
mhm.
it's hard to wrap your head around it. At least I'm finding that. And b, are there ethical issues that come up with this, or do you have to worry about any of that stuff at all? I know it's still in early days in terms of R&D work, but
Mhm.
do you feel that there would be questions that would come from the regulatory bodies around this? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, actually, for now there is no regulation because it's really too early stage to have
Yeah.
something so special.
Yeah.
But every new technology is bringing new questions, and also some ethical. So we actually get a lot of questions from the public, and we want to make sure that our work is accepted by society.
Yeah.
So we actually put a lot of effort to encourage philosophers to work on this topic. And
Okay.
there might be some study very soon. It's not funded yet, so we cannot disclose, but hopefully there will be soon a study on biocomputing, on ethical and philosophical aspects of biocomputing. And it's normal thing, because everything what is new requires some kind of new consideration from philosophers, of course. So we hope they can help us.
Of course. My mind is spinning right now, to be perfectly honest with you, because at least the way I'm thinking about this, you're replicating something that's within the human body, and you're
Yes.
basically trying to make it more um, productive.
Mm-hmm.
I could see people, getting all caught up, in the fact that saying, are you going to create a new version of human species that is way smarter simply because you now give it an extra algorithmic powers, kind of thing, right? In fact, the closest analogy I can think about is the movie The Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
where remember there's a scene in The Matrix where he gets certain skill sets every time he wants to do something. They just press a button and he gets it basically, right? I'm
Yes.
just curious, is that where we're headed? Because that would be pretty crazy.
No, I think there are many researchers who are working on this, but not us. We
Okay.
want to build a general purpose computer. So actually something outside human body, and not kind of like computers today, but they are
Yeah.
with silicon. But yes, you cannot exclude that our knowledge, if we are able to learn to teach neurons in vitro, then maybe, who knows, this knowledge can be used to modify human brain, for example. So
Right.
maybe one day you can upload foreign language in your head,
Hmm.
maybe, but it's not our objective. But our work can help others who work on this stuff.
Amazing. Amazing. So tell me something, like as you're going through this, you'd
Mhm.
reached out to me saying, hey, I want to talk about this. And I said, yeah, this is really an exciting space. So how how are you going to basically get to a point where like you got a lot of technical challenges ahead of you right now? Obviously, I get that.
Yes.
You have funding challenges, as well, by the
Mhm.
sounds of it. And then you've got ethical and
Mhm.
questions that are going to
Mhm.
come up. There's lots of hurdles that I see right now. So how do you go about navigating all that? Like, where do you kind of like say, okay, today or this month we're going to go from X to Y?
Mhm.
Give me a sense of that. Give me a day in your life in that sense as to what happens.
Well, we focus on the technical work. Definitely, we are a group of scientists and engineers,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of ideas, a lot of brainstorming.
Mm.
And our group is really agile, you could say,
Yeah.
and things are changing. So we test something, we see if it works or not, and then we continue accordingly. So I would say there is a lot of dynamic in the work.
Yeah.
Um, because it's new, totally new, and you still have to discover what is the best way of doing this. So, like in research, you have to often be open to change your plans, maybe.
Hmm.
So we believe in some technique, maybe in some approach, and then maybe in few months we change it because we see results are not good.
Yeah.
So I would say it's very dynamic, such a work, and unpredictable. So you cannot really say for sure what
Yeah.
you are going to do in 6 months or in 1 year,
Hmm.
because you make every decision about new activity based on the previous results. So that's how it is usually also in experimental science.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that. I totally get that.
Mhm.
So I'm actually getting questions right now online. So I want to just
Oh,
read.
that's fantastic.
Yep. So let me kind of like read one of them.
Mhm.
It's a little bit long. So the future is being built today. Would evolution end up being put into play in this process, where as you identify the neurons that work best in learning,
Mhm.
then end up helping continue to identify the genes that build the neurons that work best in learning?
Oh no, that's not the no 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 no. Actually, no, we don't try. No no, it's just that we try to figure out what neurons which are already, let's say, in the brain, because there are many different type of neurons.
Yeah.
Which combinations of neurons is best for learning? So it's not really about discovering the genes, but rather looking at what is in nature and maybe you have different regions in the brain. You have cortex, you have striatum, you have
Mhm.
hippocampus, and you have to figure out which neurons mixture is best for learning. But it will not really answer. I'm not sure it will give answer about which genes are best for learning. It's more about which type of neurons are best.
Okay, so it's a more fundamental
Yes, absolutely. And
component,
we will
basically.
not, at least for the moment, we don't create wonder neurons, some perfect, some enhanced, because that's also some. There are people who work on that. At least for now, we don't try, but
Yeah,
that's possibility for the future that maybe we can genetically try to enhance the neurons. But that's not what we try to do now. But it's possible.
it is possible. Okay, well, everything is possible, I guess. But at the end of the day, to go from possibility to plausibility to actual development, that's a that's a totally different process, I would imagine.
Yes. Actually, I was just thinking now
Yeah.
that our platform would be a great tool, actually, maybe to screen for different genes, because you could have theoretically
Hmm.
different mutations in neurons, and you could see which one is learning faster. But it's rather for the future. It would be very efficient to test. But
Interesting. Well, that's pretty crazy. So, I'm kind of like trying to think through, as you're doing this, you also talked about neuroscience earlier when you introduced yourself, right?
yes.
So, what are the elements of neuroscience that comes into this process for you in terms of the development phase and the experimentation phase?
So actually, neuroscience here is a tool, because I would say the biggest challenge is in mathematics and signal processing,
Yeah.
because we have to figure out how to program neurons. So it's more mathematical, I would
Yeah.
say, to figure out the algorithm. But biology is more to be stable and correct. So it's more like we don't maybe discover anything, at least today,
Mm-hmm.
but we just try to be as correct as possible. So we have healthy neurons that they can live long time, and they can be in good condition. So we use neuroscience tools, which are actually widely used in other labs,
Mm-hmm.
but other labs are using them for different purpose, for
Mm-hmm.
biomedical research, and we have kind of the same stuff, but for other purpose, for making computer. So actually, and also when you program neurons, actually at this stage,
Yeah.
when you try to interact with neurons, you have to. Well, it's good to know something. Definitely, it's necessary to know something about biology, because otherwise, you might don't know how to. You can kill them, for example, if you put too much current, or you have to know that there is a lot of noise in the biological data,
Mm-hmm.
so you have to filter the signal from the noise. So you need to know something about neurons, also stuff which we know from biology about learning
Mm-hmm.
also help us to design the experiment. So for now, it's like coding in Verilog, for example, in very low level language on
Yeah.
computer, where you really have to understand the hardware and you need to know everything very well. So the same is with neurons. So programming neurons requires some understanding of neuroscience and biology. Yes.
So you mentioned biology. So again, I'm the naive person here.
Mhm.
So forgive me if I'm asking naive questions. Um,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
can you actually mix neurons from humans and other species or plants, or is that not feasible?
I think you can do this, but why would you do this?
So again, I'm the layperson here. So I'm asking questions because I don't know what I don't know right now, right?
No, I
Um,
think theoretically it's possible, but I
yeah,
would maybe
yeah,
I'm not sure. I don't know if they would connect between each other. I never did such experiment, but I think it's that wouldn't make sense really, because actually, usually things from the same species are working better. It's also the same when you do transplants. Even another, even the material with another genetic
mm,
profile, but from the same species, is also
yeah,
difficult. So the cells don't like, to be mixed. So, so
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I actually don't know what would happen, but I think it's best to stick to one species. Also, human neurons probably the best for
Yeah,
learning.
no, I get that. But the only reason why I asked the question, and this is, I'll tell you
Mhm.
what prompted it. I think about the redwood trees in California, for example, right? They've been
Yes.
there for hundreds of years,
Mhm.
right? So I'm just thinking like, okay, if there are certain species that have been around for hundreds of years that are growing and are still not facing,
Mhm.
that they're still like living beings at the end of the day, is
Mhm.
there something there that gives you longevity, for example. So that was the idea or the thought process,
Okay.
right?
But actually, no, that's not no, because human neurons are have enough lifespan. It's just the problem that in the lab, the condition is not perfect. It's not like a human body; they are perfect. It's exactly how it should be. But
Yeah.
in the lab, it's always artificial, so that's why cells are living shorter.
Mhm.
So the whole trick is how to make the life in the lab as close as possible to nature. But actually, human neurons, they can live up to 100 years even, so that would be long enough for a computer.
That is true. That is true. you know, so okay, so again, I know I apologize if I'm asking naive questions because I don't know what I don't know here, right? But
Mhm.
um, so in a way, as you're building all this stuff out and you're trying to figure out how to, get to the computational powers that you need,
Mhm.
um, eh, tell me about you know the process you go through in terms of trying to run your experiments. Like, you have a hypothesis, you build
Mhm.
up the test, right? You're using signal processing at the end of the day to see if it actually works or not. How
Mhm.
do you set up your criteria for success, for example? I'm just curious as to how you would go through that process. I'm just curious.
No, for now we run very simple experiments.
Yeah.
So we often use closed loops. This is closed feedback. It's very
Mhm.
common way of learning in nature. We also learn such a way. So, for example, you want that neurons increase the activity. So you stimulate them with electrical signals. You measure the activity, and if it's increased as you wanted, you give them dopamine. If it's not increased, then you don't give anything. So you try to stimulate them. So for the moment, we try very simple stuff, like very simple, just to see any like meaningful change in the behavior of neurons due to our actions. So that's very like the simplest way, the most simple thing you can do with neurons.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if you're doing it that way, then one of the claims you made is that the power usage or power consumption is a million times lower than what we
Yes.
currently do. What is it about the way the neurons operate that leads to such a low usage of energy at the end of the day? Do you have a sense for that, or do you know why that's happening?
Yes, we know quite a lot about high level on how neurons work. So we know that they process information in totally different way than digital. They are analog signal. They are some people believe it's more rich. They are in 3D in many recurrent connections, which are also possible in digital but more difficult. So brain is very well connected. It's very parallel, so you can have a lot of things at the same time, and information is encoded in time and space. So there are also like single neurons has a lot of states, really a lot, much more than maybe a neuron, digital neuron. Um,
Sorry, what do you mean by states? I don't know what you mean by that.
like there are actually a lot of things which can happen on the surface of a neuron
Okay.
on the membrane. So basically, when a neuron is spiking, is producing electricity, then some ions are moving. So it's actually chemical kind of
Hmm.
electricity. It's not like the current we have in our electrical devices, but it's also electrical activity. So
Hmm.
basically, the charge is changing on the neuron, and the membrane is very complex. So it's much more complex than any kind of actually model which you can create in silico. So actually, any model we have on neurons is always a simplification of what is in reality, what
Hmm.
is real biological neurons. Um, and information is encoded in space and time, so that is also totally different. So we don't have zero and ones in like we have in digital, but we have timing of spike, so when they spike and where in the brain. So that's also information. So that's totally different, and because of these reasons, it's more efficient. It's also very difficult sometimes to compare. You can just look at these tasks that, for example, our brain is using much less energy for analyzing images especially the dynamic when things are changing in the environment.
Hmm.
Because, for example, we are filtering information a lot.
Hmm.
So that means, for example, when you drive a car, you only notice the changes. So kind of like you register the changing pixels, while computer is usually analyzing everything.
Hmm.
So yes, there are a lot of things which are around different encoding, different processing, and filtering information. So all this creates very efficient neuron.
Wow. So, in terms of the data processing part of it,
Mhm.
like the analogy you gave about like someone driving a car, you're totally right. This you're processing so much information
Yes.
as an individual. Um, if what you're really saying is you're breaking it down to like the most basic level and
Hmm.
saying that how is it then able to identify and act on the information it's actually getting
Hmm.
to then go do something that's either like in the car analogy, do I stop the car, do I brake, do I slow down, do I speed up, whatever it is,
Hmm.
all that's happening at a fraction of a second.
Hmm.
So it's already kind of like there's an efficiency play there already in the human mind, I would imagine. And if I hear you right, you're saying that that can also be replicated now artificially, and that's why you believe that that's why it's going to have less energy consumption as a consequence.
Well, we can artificially maybe replicate. I don't know if it's a good word. We can use neurons, the same building blocks as we
The
have in the
same book.
brain
Yeah.
for processing information. So we hope they will be the same efficient. Also,
So
learning. Another story,
yeah,
another very huge difference, because
yeah,
problem with AI is that it needs a lot of data for learning,
yeah,
and in our brain we have something like a one-shot learning. So you see dog one time and cat one time, and that's enough for you to know the difference forever. And
yeah.
for a computer, you need thousands of images. So that's also where the efficiency is, because you need much less processing for learning.
So yeah, I get that, and that I had never thought about it, but now that you're saying it, it makes
Mhm.
complete sense, right? But in that process, then they know, like in the example of dog versus cat, that's
Mhm.
very binary, right? In a way.
Mhm.
Um, but you also mentioned like the some of the opportunities here is that there's analog information that's being processed and
Mhm.
transferred basically. So are you thinking that there's going to be a mix between like binary digital versus analog in the context of building out these kinds of biocomputers, or do you think it's going to be leaning one way or the other, or am I even asking the right question? I'm not even
No,
sure.
no. This is actually different things, because when you see cat and dogs, it's actually binary problem. So the problem you solve is binary,
Yeah.
but the way how you process this can still be analog. But the brain actually can process both analog and digitized signal. So, but
Yeah.
actually, analog is more complex. So, some people believe that this gives you more efficiency in processing information. But I know from engineers that the opinions are divided. But
Yeah.
so maybe this analog thing, I'm not sure how much it matters, but some people believe that analog processing can be more efficient. But actually, when you interface, because you always interface brain still, no, not brain, actually, the neurons also,
Yeah.
with the digital hardware. So we still, of course, believe that digital will not disappear. So neurons will be complementary, and there is
Mhm.
always interface. So actually, now when we do experiments with neurons, we write code in Python programming language. This is digital computer,
Yeah.
and it's connected with the living neurons. But for this, actually, we always have to translate the language. So we have to use the digital to analog and analog to digital
So yeah.
converters, so that to enable this communication between analog neurons and digital computer.
Oh my gosh, I'm literally having flashbacks to my time in college right now. As you're talking about this stuff, I remember having sat through multiple classes talking about those translation systems, and the challenge that I remember
Mhm.
even back then was the fact that to code using C, or back then it was
Mhm.
C. Python is obviously more recent, but
Yes.
it was not easy, and to
Mhm.
think through the logic flow and to kind of like make it tight enough to be able to process it quickly was always a challenge, is what I remember uh,
Yes.
from back then. And it seems like that still is a challenge in the way you're describing it right now too, even if it's Python.
Yes, of course, it's very big challenge. So programming neurons is huge challenge, absolutely, because nobody knows how to do this. So we have to do this experimentally, try
Hmm.
different ideas for that.
So do you feel like this could be, if this area becomes, let's say more than just promising as an R&D project to something that actually can be commercially viable, do you actually see that this could be a new set of skills that people have to go back and relearn in a way, or
Yes,
learn
absolutely. As mentioned,
through
we
this?
expect to have billions of profit once the technology works.
Yeah,
And when it comes to the skills, I think that there is general trend. I would say not only biocomputing, but
yeah,
generally there is increasing demand, and also some universities are already making masters for this.
yeah.
There is increasing demand for people who understand biology and are engineers also.
Hmm. So,
So I think
so
it's important combination for many things in future technologies.
Yeah, so this is such an inspiring conversation because you're talking about something that is not on people's radars right now at all, right? When we talk about being on the next frontier, you are living that right now, right? So, what's inspiring you to go down this pathway? Like, like this takes a lot of motivation to
Mhm.
explore this area and kind of like continue down this path basically. So I'm just very curious to hear like what got you down this path, what fascinated you so much about this particular area, and what keeps you going every single day.
So for me, a combination of neuroscience and engineering is perfect combination because
Yeah,
I can still use my knowledge from neuroscience and I have commercial expertise in software, so that's a perfect combination. I generally like to do things which nobody else is doing. So this project is very original. We have very little competition. There are other people also who work on that, but very few.
yeah.
So that makes the whole thing more special. And also because it's a startup, we are exploring new territories, so there are no predefined solutions. So we have to figure out. It's a bit like in science
Yeah.
that you have to figure out stuff when you are going. So it's not that you know clearly what and how you will do. So I love that this exploratory, and I think generally I would say from my observation, deep tech projects are very cool because people who work on them are very nice because you have to be really educated, you have to be very curious,
Hmm.
you have to study a lot, and usually it attracts the nice teams. So I think generally working in R&D is very nice. Also nice atmosphere usually. Also because for good research you need nice atmosphere. Otherwise, the creativity doesn't work. So you
Yeah.
have to be nice to people. So we are forced to be nice team. So I think it's good to work on such a deep tech project.
When I lived in the UK, I was working with a company called Breakthrough,
Mhm.
and they have their process in terms of how they run their sessions. And one of their tools that they use to help people be more creative
Mhm.
is, are you sitting on the red train or are you sitting on the blue train? It's a little analogy that they use.
Yes.
So when you're upset, you're angry,
Mhm.
you're emotionally, in a negative mindset, let's say, that's when they say you're on the red train. But
Okay.
when you're happy, energetic, excited, you're on the blue train. So
Okay.
one of the tips that they would give us as we were trying to be more creative was that if you're in on the red train, what's
Mhm.
going to make you flip from the red train to the blue train?
Mhm.
And just by having once people understand the difference between the two colored trains,
Mhm.
and someone says, hey, Yogesh, you're on the red train.
Mhm.
What's it going to take you to get on the blue train? It's amazing to see how quickly your mind flips from like, yeah, you're right. I'm not actually being productive here. I'm not really
Mhm.
contributing in a productive manner. So let me kind of like change my mindset and attitude. Otherwise, I'm not going to be really helping this team move forward, basically. It
Yes.
was, and I saw,
Self-awareness is very helpful. Yes.
of course, but
Mhm.
when you talked about like the team structure and the collaboration that comes along with it, it kind of got me thinking about this particular example because ultimately it comes down to emotion. It comes down to activity in your mind of what are you actually thinking about. And I'm just thinking if there's something there in terms of you know how does that switch even happen, right? So in your work that you're doing right now, I'm just curious, like if there are those kinds of areas that might actually inspire you in terms of figuring out how to kind of like progress forward with the whole neuron
Mhm.
structures and the programming that goes behind it and all that kind of stuff. I'm just curious if that could be another pathway for you to think about.
Well, I think we take a lot of lessons from neuroscience. We try to, there's a lot of literature. Also, actually, different theories about software. For example, reinforcement learning
Yeah.
is very good, gives a lot of good models on how learning happens. So, yes, there are a lot of theories, although nobody yet figured out how to program neurons in vitro. So, it's all theories, and
Hmm.
we can get inspired. But it's still, you have to do the work, a lot of experiments.
I totally get that. So, do you feel there could be a point of time where you might come to the conclusion that, hey, the existing, like software and technologies that are currently available have too many limits to what you're trying to solve for, and
Mhm.
maybe there's a need to go develop a new programming language, for example, to help you. Is that something
Yes.
that have you considered, or is that something that's in the consideration set, or no?
Well, actually, we make a new libraries in Python specifically to make work more efficient. But
Yeah,
it's normal thing to do libraries, so you just get uh, speed up some repetitive tasks.
yeah.
And definitely, neurons will require programming language, which is totally different. Actually, totally different approach for programming. That's why it's so difficult.
Hmm.
We have to still figure out that. We need some illumination for that, some genius.
Yeah.
But you have to totally reconsider programming. So for sure, the way how neurons are programmed will be different. But in the future, of course, we will have high-level languages. So in the future, we expect that, like today, you can code computer. You don't have to know exactly how it is built,
Yeah.
and the same will be neurons. So we will have high-level languages. We will have all infrastructure like for the digital. But to discover that is very difficult to work on this, to create this.
Do you feel like companies like OpenAI or Google DeepMind are looking into this space also, or would they? I would think that they would be the ones you would probably want to be talking to for invest, as your potential investors, I would imagine.
I think they look more in neuromorphic computing, which is a bit shorter timeline. So neuromorphic computing is inspired by brain, but you don't use living neurons.
Yeah.
But you can use simulations in digital. You can use special chips, digital chips,
Yeah.
like for example Spinnaker from Manchester,
Hmm.
or you can actually create analog chips,
Hmm.
which will process analog signal inspired by brain. So usually it's time encoding. But this stuff maybe will be less revolutionary when it comes to energy savings because
Hmm.
it's not like real neurons.
Yeah.
It's something maybe in between. But they have also maybe shorter timeline because actually recently there was a paper where first LLM was run on neuromorphic hardware on Loihi from Intel. So this
Okay.
is kind of like this is digital chip, but it's kind of inspired by brain. So I think this kind of stuff. I know also OpenAI has acquired neuromorphic startup in the past, although they change a little bit direction
Hmm.
because it's also very difficult to do neuromorphic stuff.
Yeah.
But that's maybe shorter timeline.
Right.
And the fact that you can already run LLMs on that
Yeah.
neuromorphic equipment, I think is extremely important because LLMs are, I think, now the most energy consuming, as
Yeah.
far as I understood.
Yeah.
So I think this is shorter timeline because investors and big companies, they don't venture that far. Actually, the biggest risk takers are startups. And once something is working, then everyone will be interested.
Of
But
course.
usually the early stage is in the startups. And because we expect to build a computer in 10 years, it's a very long time for investors, actually. We
Yeah.
do sometimes get actually interest from industry, but it's not yet so huge because it's still risk. But I have to say that we have some commercial success because our laboratory is available remotely. Because during COVID, we developed everything so that it's accessible remotely,
Yeah.
so that our scientists didn't have to go to the lab when there was COVID. And later we decided to use this opportunity to invite others. So we have universities from all over the world who collaborate with us. They
Hmm.
access our lab remotely, do experiments. And what is really surprising, nice surprise, we have first commercial clients. So big companies, also small startups, and some even individuals, they pay us subscription. So you can buy subscription today to get access to Final Spark Lab and to try to program living neurons. So there is interest,
Yeah.
but it's still rather like people exploring the future possibilities, but it's still long timeline. So I would say that we still take the risk, and maybe not everyone believes it will work
Right.
because it's too early.
But you know what? At the end of the day, what I love about this conversation that we've had today
Mhm.
is the fact that you're not working inside a box. You are thinking much more broadly and far more, innovative. From an innovative perspective, you're literally on that forefront where you are on the edges, trying something out new. You are a signal to the rest of the industry in a
Mhm.
way of what could be. So today it may be really small and you're not big just yet, but you're right.
Mhm.
10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe in our, by the end of at least my lifetime, we could get to a point where the first applications or the first or second iterations of that are
Mhm.
already available commercially, right?
Yes.
So what's today's signal will be tomorrow's mainstream, and
Yes,
you're
absolutely.
like the very epitome of that in my mind, basically.
Yes.
So this is fantastic stuff, Evelina. I'm really, really glad that we talked about this. Tell
Thank
me,
you.
so as you're, if I was to kind of ask you, uh, I think it's a hard question, but I don't think it's hard for you at all. If there's
Mhm.
one thing you would love to accomplish in the next 12 months personally, what would that be for you?
Oh, well, I work on the commercial side, so we are talking to investors.
Yeah,
So we dream about investor who would have a 50 million Swiss francs, which is around $50 million. That would be great success from the
yeah,
commercial side.
yeah,
Then, of course, I wish that we have more clients. But actually, for now, it's difficult to have clients because we still have to run the lab. So we are a very small team,
yeah,
only 6 people. So actually, clients sometimes is a challenge because we have to choose between doing R&D or
yeah,
serving clients.
yeah,
So actually, I think investment would be the best solution for that, so that we can increase our team, because that's all what we need. We need more people to work on the problem, because it's normal thing. The more people work on the problem, the more the faster it develops.
yeah.
So yes, so investment it's actually the main commercial, let's say, or non-scientific objective which we have.
I get that. I get that. Well, listen, Dr. Ewelina Kurtys, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on my show. And if
Thank you.
anybody at NVIDIA or Intel or AMD are listening, maybe there's an opportunity there. I don't know. You
Yes,
know,
we encourage to get in touch. It's very
yeah,
easy to get in touch with us on finalspark.com. There are forms to fill in, or also our emails are there on the team section. There are all the teams, everyone from our team, and their email address, and also LinkedIn. Very easy to get in touch if anyone has questions or suggestions. So we encourage.
fantastic. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. So please do reach out to her.
Yes,
She's as you can hear from this podcast, she's literally on the forefront there of
yes.
creating the next revolution. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure.
All right, thank you. So for our audience, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much for joining us, and talk to you soon.
Talk to you. Bye bye.